All right, so these are a few different types of hackamores. Now, before we really talk about hackamores as what they are, it's important that we make the distinguishment. These are all traditional rawhide hackamores, except for this one. This is made of horsehair, but it's still traditional. This is not to be confused with the mechanical hackamore that they really have nothing to do with hackamores at all. They don't operate the same, and it's not a traditional piece of equipment. So just know that a mechanical hackamore is completely out of the realm of what we're talking about as far as real hackamores. So hackamores are always going to be made out of rawhide, and they'll even have a rawhide core. So basically, you've got a piece of rawhide inside of this, and then the strands that make up the hackamore, called the plaits, are braided around the core. So if it's a real hackamore, it's not going to have a cable core or any kind of synthetic type of a core. It's going to be a natural rawhide core. A lot of the time you can look on the bottom and you can see the rawhide at the bottom of the heel knot and know what the core is from that. You can also just kind of squeeze it. I tell people, if you think about the average stiffness of a garden hose when it's like 60 degrees outside and it's sitting in the shade. Something around there. Now they come in different pliabilities. Both of these are about the same stiffness. Some of them, especially when you get down to the smaller sizes, they're way more limber, and we'll get into that in a minute. But your two most common sizes are your 3/4, which is this one here, and then your 5/8. So if you look at them, you can tell this one on the right, which is the 3/4. It's a good bit wider. So these 3/4, I don't really use them that much, but the logic of this is you would go to the biggest one, the 3/4, for like starting a colt. And then after maybe a month or 30 days on the colt, when he kind of got where he was starting to have the general idea of what was going on, you could go down a size and get a little bit more pliability and a little bit better transfer of the signal. So that's kind of the logic in going to smaller and smaller, because when you try to manipulate this with your reins, you're kind of just moving the whole entire thing. But this one here, when a horse is more refined, with it being more pliable, you can kind of just move little pieces of it at a time. So basically, in a sense, you go smaller, the more refined that you get with your skills and with your horse. So then after you've graduated from, let's say, the 5/8 size, you may go down to like a 1/2 inch. And if we're talking tradition, this is generally where you would also put the bridle in, which would be a 2-rein setup. And that's along the lines of what we're talking about, but that would come way down the line, like when you could just about ride your horse bridleless. So we won't get into that too deep, but just know that the further advancing stages of these different hackamores would be something smaller where you're riding in a 2-rein setup. But we're keeping the general topic on these bigger ones, which is the most common that you would use and what you would use on most horses. So if you can only get one, my absolute favorite, I've even got the 5/8 on this horse right now, and it's a rawhide core, about the same stiffness as this one. But if you get a 5/8, that's a really good all-around size. So if you're wondering, well, if I only want to get one, go with a 5/8. So there are also, I don't really have any that have a whole lot of plaits in them, meaning the amount of strands. So if you can see on these two, I believe this one may be like a 16 plait, where this one may be an 18. But if you look at the braid work in these different hackamores, they will cut the strings finer and finer to have a finer and finer and tighter woven braid. and that's called the plat. A lot of the times, one of the things that makes a hackamore more or less expensive is the amount of plat or the amount of strands that they use, because more plats takes longer and it's more intricate and time consuming to build. All of these are made by hand, which is really cool. Now, the last one here that we'll hit on, this is a lot more unique. This is a horsehair hackamore. And I think I might have only ridden in this twice. I mostly got it just because it's kind of cool and traditional. But the logic with these is, and it kind of depends on how you want to think about it. I don't really like to think about it like this, but the logic with these horsehair hackamores is you can dunk them in water and it makes them really, really stiff. And because of the hairs, they also are a little bit prickly. So logic dictates that if the horse is being kind of heavy in a standard hackamore, you can put him in one of these for a few rides and it will kind of soften him back up. But the other side of that coin, and this is probably a better way to think about that kind of stuff, is, well, if he's getting heavy in this one, the solution is to improve yourself, not to put something different on the horse. So a thing I forgot to mention earlier, one of the biggest reasons that I like these hackamores is, from my experience, it seems to me that in a hackamore, a horse is thinking more and dwelling on the release of the hackamore, where with some kind of bit, it seems as though the horse is more focused on, and maybe even a little bit distracted by, the pressure that is oncoming that he knows or thinks is about to happen. So when we pair that with the statement that horses learn from the release of pressure, not the application, it makes a lot of sense why horses seem to progress a lot quicker in these. And they also seem to stay a lot more in a right frame of mind. Like if I had a horse that was really hot and always wanted to go, the first thing I would do is put him in a hackamore. I know that seems kind of counterintuitive, so you might think, well, yeah, but if you do that, your horse is going to take off and run through it. Well, for one, we would do the groundwork and the preparation to where we wouldn't have to worry about that, where he wouldn't feel the need to run off or run through the hackamore. But secondly, it would be, a lot of people feel, well, I ride my horse in this really big bit because it gives me more control of him. And that is kind of true, but just know that anytime you're having to add more of something to get the feeling of more control over your horse, you're sacrificing something else. For example, if somebody that's not very good at it puts a really big rank bit in a horse's mouth, yeah, it won't take much to get him to not push through the bit, but he'll be throwing his head, and if that goes on, he'll get real hot and bothered, and you can very well blow him up. So know that there's a trade-off. It's good to keep it simple and know that the success or lack thereof comes from the rider's hands and the way you think about things and the way you approach your horse, not so much the gear that you ride him in. Hey, I'm Carson James, and I have two things that I want to tell you about. Number one, I'm trying to grow a beard and it's not going well. But number two, which is probably more important, if you want to see more videos like this, including free updates, all kind of cool offers, you can sign up to become a Carson James Insider. It's a really neat deal. It's completely free. More information in the link below. The problem is that it's too patchy, right? It's just not working. It's patchy.